This is Wickham Sound.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Art Show on 106.6 FM at Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain. This is the weekly show where we chat about the local arts news. We have an album review from Twangling Jack Ford over in the Oak Shed. We head over to the Rhylight Zone for a reading of some short story and or poetry. And we have a different guest on each week and also share some local unsigned and independent music. As always, you can reach out to me here at the studio by emailing dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. And I particularly want to hear from poets, musicians, authors, performers, anyone doing stuff in the local creative scene. Please do reach out and get in touch. You can also find us on Facebook if you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, and we're repeated here on Wickham Sound on Monday nights, as well as you can listen to us on Catch Up and on demand on the Wickham Sound website. Listen again on iTunes, Spotify, and anywhere you get podcasts and stuff. So this week we are going to be joined by local author Paul Waters. I mean, he lives locally, although he's originally from Ireland, and that very much comes across in his work. So we're going to chat with Paul a little bit later on. But first off, we are going to go over to the Rhylight Zone, and this is some poetry. This is Burning Bridges by myself, Dane Cobain. That's me.
Burning Bridges. Time management was never his strong point because he knew that time had its own mind and liked to decide by ticking by, and so it wasn't a good member of the Art Society. People always ignore alcoholics and their comic timing, and they knew when to say what and where to say it, which is why Winston Churchill led the Brits to victory while Hitler needed desperately to unwind, and so he shot himself in a Berlin bunker. As for the vampires, they fell from the sky when the EMP pulse hit, while the bats laughed and bit their own necks until the blood fell and infected the peasants beneath them. And then the animals ordered pizzas delivered by drones and dropped from the sky with little parachutes attached to the boxes. In the darkness, the master of the house fell down the stairs and spilled candle wax on his hands. He lay there unconscious until the mistress woke up and tripped over him when she went to pour herself a glass of water. And the end of the world rolled around and announced itself through the ramblings of some crazy conspiracy theorists on a Usenet group. And then with the lights turned down, they tried to kiss each other. Or rather, he tried to kiss her and then she pulled away from him. Not because she didn't want to, but because she knew it was a bad idea and she had more common sense than he did. And the cards predicted it beforehand, so he never said or did anything, just waited for the moment to pass so he could go back to being miserable, which is what he was good at. And the world ran out of fossil fuels, and the introverts survived the firefights and the plagues of rotten animal flesh. And in the end he held hands with himself and realised he never loved no one, double negatives intended but never appreciated. Well, what else is there to do but to wait for death in the first place? That's all I'm doing. Redundant advice. Try not to suffer or be discriminated against, and for the love of everything good in life, don't meet your death at the hands of a gunman on a rampage. Try not to fall in love with the people you fall in love with, or to practice civil disobedience and get arrested, like Martin Luther King when he wrote a letter from Birmingham jail. Don't be hoaxed or fall victim to a rogue trader, and make sure if you reverse around a corner you don't hit the oncoming traffic. Don't be raped by some silly society that tries to interfere with the way your body runs. It's your body, not mine, and you may control it. Don't be fooled by what society asks of you. Never surrender. Never surrender, friend, you're the best whoever you are and whoever you think I might be. Who knows who, what, where and how, I think we're mostly accidental. Sometimes it's all dumb luck, and there's not much at all for us to live for, but we live on anyway. What, you think the person you love loves you? You must be deluded. Nothing's as important as people think. I don't believe you, and you shouldn't believe me. You should keep on fighting until the armistice, sue for peace and prepare for war. Just do it. Out. Okay, so I made it out and left the house, and it's honestly, almost overwhelming. Can't hear from one ear, don't want to hear from the other. Not even sure why I came here and can't even go for a cigarette. I reinvented myself because I hate what I see in the mirror. Never knew confidence in the first place, and the fire inside is no longer a fire, and it never was. Muck. They're doing their eyeliner with the muck from the windowsill, scooped up on the end of a pencil and applied to the face like the punches and kicks that brought them there. This is jailhouse beauty in a place where they'll use whatever's available. Sometimes the muck from the windowsills is all you've got. A quick poem before the wolves come home. All the evil spread like a hooker's legs, and your deviled eggs are heaven sent, I reckon. I'm an American veteran sent to protect you, and did I mention that affection's my intention? I wish I could afford to risk my fortune on the dice that fall from your hand. Always zinc. Always answering back begrudgingly, calling Cthulhu's demonic darkness, evil everywhere for fireballs, great garbage heaps helping insects in June's joy, killing kittens like life means mortal nothings, not on our pure principles, quick quandaries reeling rancid, sodden till they understand us, violent violets with weird Xbox xenophobia, yesterday you zoomed zinc. Delirium tremens. Your insides are outside and inside again. This is the terror recognised in Whiplash, and if I die before I wake, I won't have time to say. And Craig writes poems full of swears, and this is not in the job description with sweat in your eyes and mouth. It never gets easy, and every time I die I feel alive again, even with the sweats and shakes, and I'm up on bricks once again, and she said I look like and I smell like and I feel like, and every time I die I feel alive again. Walt Whitman stumbling through the grass, William Carlos Williams long dead and buried, Allen Ginsberg with a sunburned head and Orlovsky's stuck between his teeth, Neil Cassidy dead beside the railroad tracks. They all have the same kind of madness. The truth. Your anxiety does not control you. Your depression is not an accurate depiction of what the world is. Do not listen to them. They will try to trick you. Your fear of crowds and the great outdoors do not define you. When it gets real bad and you cancel plans and refuse to make them, and when your friends drift away and pretend they never knew you, they're not the friends you need or indeed deserve. You are so much more than those misfiring neurons, it's not even funny. You are a walking, talking contradiction, infinitely fragile and stronger than you could ever know. The sum of all your efforts will be measured however you measure it. And I know it's hard and life seems dark, but you have to fight for your right to party, even if you party alone with a buck in your hands. Your substance abuse is a rookie move. It makes more problems than it saves you from. But we're all young once, and it's the mistakes we make which define us, not because we made them, but because we moved on from them. Suicide is an option. It always is. The trick is never to force yourself to take it. You can have hope, or you can be hopeless. This is the truth, and it always has been. Leg day. People talk about leg day like it's Tuesday or maybe a Thursday, but I have legs every day except for when I'm legless. I never used to care for exercise. I had extra fries with 2 sides and a pie, but now I guess you could say I'm a changed man. I'm eating a little better and doing push-ups every hour like Dan Brown does, or at least I'm trying to. I also quit smoking cigarettes, which can only be a good thing. It makes the days shorter and the nights longer. I don't want to live forever, I mean I guess I do, but I'd like to leave a pretty corpse, and at least I won't run out of breath when I'm climbing the stairs. Big reptiles. Giant snakes are big and deadly, but they're not quite as deadly as humans, so when a snake kills a kid and the media reacts badly, I wish they'd remember it's not a person. It doesn't hunt for sport, it doesn't declare war, it doesn't support racism or slavery. You could argue it's less of a serpent than a person is, it just wants a little bit of exercise. How big can a snake get? Can it get bigger than Kanye West? Was David Icke right, and is every human in power really just a snake in a people suit? Because the way I see it, that's the only way I'll believe that snakes are worse than people. And I swear I say that as a person. But then I may be a little bit biased. I always preferred animals whether they're covered in scales or feathers. Snakes kill fewer babies than people do. So there are documentaries about ivory trafficking, photographs of dead elephants with their tusks torn out, dead presidents with bullets in their heads, 11-year-old Liverpudlian kids with bullets through their necks, promising young rappers with knives in their stomachs, pop starlets playing concerts interrupted with a bang, dead tigers with no ships and their ribs left open to the vultures, terrified pensioners crossing streets to avoid ethnic minorities, TV presenters sharing ill-informed views on social networks, driving up and down the hill on motorised scooters, fascists in prison bringing drugs inside in people's vaginas, cocaine smugglers sinking boats and getting caught underwater in frog suits, rich old white men who run things staring at their penises in the mirror, old married couples eating grapefruit in the morning, teenage gang members hiding guns inside the doghouse, rich people hiring poor people to tend their gardens, thin people and fat people trying to meet a socially acceptable happy medium, television manufacturers boasting about their pixel counts, European regulators drafting rules about privacy, hens and pigs and sheep in factory farm stalls, loan sharks leaning on their customers and waiting for repayment, mosquito nets with holes in them sent out to starving children to thin their numbers, brides and bridegrooms gathering friends and relatives in a single room, pollutants in rivers sweeping their inevitable way towards the sea, big bags of kids given to snotty little kids for trick-or-treating, bad reviews for good books and good reviews for bad ones, scheming politicians indistinguishable from the actors who play them on Netflix specials, people moving house because the landlord has found himself a buyer, rain falling down and battering itself angrily against stained glass windows, stabbing sensations inside stomachs when sufferers stuff themselves silly, black and white movies with long dead lead actors and directors, imaginary nuclear wars between two rival nations, ghosts of the dead in the West Wing as the wind blows over the water. Never ever. Never kill your wife and make it look like a suicide. Her body will eventually rise to the top of the lake or be discovered by a dog walker in the middle of a forest. Your wife is not worth murdering. Divorce her. Give her Manderley and most of your possessions. It's bad for your bank account, but better for your soul.
Alright, that was Burning Bridges, some poetry by myself, Dane Cobain. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM at Wickham Sound, and it's time for a little bit of music. So this is Bitterroot with their version of All Along the Watchtower.
The Joker to the thief. There's too much confusion. I can't get no
this really was so true, I'd be crying now like you. But I am dry-eyed while you weep tears of rage. If this were so true, that I lived through you, that I died for you, what a fool I'd be. You're the one said my dreams were passing clouds, flimsy words that would fade, it said aloud. If this really was so true, I'd be bitter now like you. But I'm feeling fine while you weep tears of rage. If this were so true, that I lived through you, that I died for you, what a fool I'd be. You're the one said my life was just a mess. All my fine ideas were lacking in finesse. If this really was so true, I'd be desperate now like you. But I am okay while you weep tears of rage. If this were so true, that I lived through you, that I died for you, what a fool I'd be. If this were so true, that I lived through you, that I died for you, what a fool I'd be. What a fool I'd be. What a fool I'd be.
That was If This Really Were So True by Clive Whitelock. Before that we had Bitterroot with All Along the Watchtower. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain, and I'm here this week in conversation with Paul Waters, author of Blackwater Town. So over to Paul.
So the first question is one I ask everybody, and you're surrounded by books at the moment as well, so hopefully you'll have plenty of inspiration for it. It's what was the last book that you read, and what did you think of it?
That's really easy because it was today. It was The Day of the Jackal, which I've read many times before by Frederick Forsyth, and it's a really good book. I've reread it, so I must like it. It's kind of I always imagine it as having a more spare style, a more austere style than it actually has. It's a bit more colourful and flowery than I'd imagined, but it's businesslike, harsh, unsentimental, and it's supposedly it redefined the genre according to Lee Child anyway. And anyway, it's really good, and it makes things more difficult because for people who haven't read it or don't know about it, there are two films of The Day of the Jackal, and one of them is really great, the first one, and the second one isn't really all that good. It's got Richard Gere in it and stuff like that. But the first one, Edward Fox is the Jackal. He's an international assassin who's hired to kill General de Gaulle, the president of France. So the weird thing about the book is we know, or people who were around when it was published, know that General de Gaulle was not assassinated. He died naturally. So maybe not these days, but people then, they would know that the book didn't come true. So you'd think that would remove some of the suspense. But that's part of the challenge, that the author really takes you along, even though you know, like in the real world, the assassin failed, or if it even existed. But it's just so good that it transcends that what you'd think would be that limitation, and I would highly recommend it.
Awesome. Well, it's funny because I was having a chat with somebody recently about specifically about crime fiction, and I mean more like things like the Agatha Christie books, but because they were rereading some of them, and I was saying, you know, for me, even when, if I reread an Agatha Christie, even if I remember exactly, you know, who did it and why they did it and that kind of stuff, I mean, I quite enjoy going along on the journey. But I think I'm also one of those readers where when I read crime fiction, I'm not necessarily trying to figure out who did it and why. You know, I'm quite content with the author to reveal it to me just sort of naturally as part of the narrative. But I suppose there are different kinds of readers as well.
I'm a bit like that too. Somebody was telling me that actually we were talking about writing about sex, and they were saying that the only way you should be writing about sex is if it drives the narrative on, and you should have nothing in a book that doesn't drive the narrative forward. And I was thinking, well, you know, kind of crime fiction set in Italy, and they have lovely meals. And I enjoy reading about the meals, like in Montalbano, Andrea Camilleri's books, or Donna Leon's, but particularly the Montalbano ones. He has lovely meals. And the person was saying, well, yeah, there's no point in writing about a meal unless you learn something important and it drives the narrative on. And I was like, I quite like just having a little break, enjoying the meal before we get back to the action. And so I'm a bit like you in that if I'm enjoying the way the prose is written, or the scene and just the feel of being there, I'm happy to slow down a little bit and for the pace to change before it you know, cranks up again. So maybe we're the same. Maybe some people prefer a higher speed, you know, full on all the time.
Well, mate, because I suppose as well with that, I mean, you could argue that it doesn't necessarily just have to push the plot forward, because, you know, that could be kind of world building. It could even be character building. You can learn about the characters by the kind of food that they eat, you know. So I guess it's a tough one. And it does, I suppose, depend on the genre as well, because if you're trying to write like a fast-paced thriller, then maybe skip the meal scenes, you know. Whereas if you're writing something a bit slower, or, you know, a romance or something like that, it makes a lot more sense to have those.
Yeah, I like a bit of meal, or sometimes I don't know, Inspector Rebus, John Rebus in Ian Rankin's books. He's sitting there having a drink, listening to music. He's not having revelations about solving the crime all the time. He might just be sitting there in the dark, contemplating the world and the bleakness and the richness of the city, while listening to some, you know, good meditative music and being a bit maudlin. That's all right too, I think.
So on the subject of food, because I've been doing a little bit of research on you, and you've had a sort of wide and varied career. One of the things you did is you made dinner for Pele. So what did you cook for him?
Well, I was I suppose I was second chef in a nightclub in New York, and it was a restaurant as well as a nightclub, and I was working there, and my work status, maybe let's not dwell on what that was. So I didn't ever show myself to the customers, and there was another Irish person there and two El Salvadorians who were in the same position. So we were working behind the scenes, and anyway, this guy came in, this not very tall black guy came in, and there weren't very many black guys who came in to that place. It was in the Hamptons, a very posh part of Long Island in New York. The Rolling Stones used to drink in the bar down the road. Paul Simon went to the grocery store, and loads of these shops were run by Irish people, young ones who were over working for a little while. And one of the El Salvadorians came into the kitchen. He was really excited. He was saying, Pelly was outside. Like, that can't be true. And so we kind of peered out the door, and right enough, it was him. Nobody else cared. Nobody else noticed. They just think, oh, who's this? What's this black guy doing here? We've no interest in him at all. And anyway, so for the first time ever, we came out and, you know, braved the risk of any immigration people seeing us. And we went up to him, and he was really dead on, really friendly. not very tall. He was a wee bit plumper than I'd expected. It was like he had a little football up his shirt, but he was retired from football at this
Yeah.
stage, and um, really friendly. But photographs and chat with him, and that was all lovely. And then I had to get back to work. And as I remember, from our limited range, I think I made him a seafood chowder, which was quite popular. So that's what Pele had: seafood chowder, bit of clam, that sort of thing. And hopefully he had a good night.
Cool. So obviously one of the main things I want to talk to you about today is your novel Blackwater Town, which I read probably like about 3 weeks or so ago now.
Thank you very much.
One of the interesting things about that is because I mean, would you class it as historical fiction?
I'm trying to have it every way. I sometimes call it historical crime thriller.
Yeah.
How many bookshelves I can get on in the bookshop? Well, apparently it does count as historical fiction because if you're 50, you have to be 50 years old,
right,
or back in time. So this is set in the 1950s.
Yeah.
So it just squeaks into that category. So yeah, and it's before I was born.
Yeah.
So that counts as history as well. And then there's always the risk with that of getting lost when you're writing it or conceiving it. Too many rabbit holes of research, which I did fall into. And you're thinking, how do you describe somebody starting a car or doing normal tasks that have changed so much in our lifetime? And you don't want to have some anachronism that people will just make you look ridiculous. But then do you really have to go into all that detail all the time? It could be doesn't matter how they started the car. Just say they started the car.
Yeah.
Drove off. You don't need to worry about whether it was a key or a button or a crank or a push.
Yeah.
Well, maybe a push you would. And but obviously it's not that far in the past. There are people alive who can talk to me about it, and they did. That's why I kind of had the inspiration for writing the story from hearing dodgy tales from people who were around at that time. As it's set during this little known uprising on the Irish border. So I know people who were serving in the police back then, and they would tell me things that happened that were never published in the media or in the history books. And I took some of those stories and made up some stories and mixed them together of the conflict then and some non-political stuff too, and squashed them together.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure it's true to what the historical reality and the spirit of it, but not, it's fiction. It's not completely true.
Yeah, and I suppose as well, there's not like it's not like again the Charles de Gaulle thing where exactly what happened to him as well. So you can take some liberties there because you're not writing about a super well-known figure or something like that. You're not doing historical fiction about Henry VIII where there's going to be countless sources and sort of scholars out there. But then again, it does feel very grounded both in the place and in the time. I mean, even that some of the groundings in the time, I like there were just the little references to the space race and to it was Laika, wasn't it? The dogs the Russians sent into space, and then there was just a very Irish response to that as well, like the way the characters are talking about like sending the dog into space, and like, oh, how is he going to get back? And I don't think it works like that. And
I wish I know who I'd send up there instead. Well, that's probably the way we feel about a lot of the Elon Musk and Richard Branson. Who can we get rid of?
Yeah,
blast them all up there.
I mean, another thing as well I liked as well, where talking about the rockets and stuff, and the characters were saying that's kind of like the last thing we need around here is people with rockets as well. It's bad enough as it is. So, but yeah, I mean, because you grew up in Ireland and you're sort of Irish heritage as well. So I guess you were able to put quite a lot of yourself into that as well, even though I guess, as you say, it was a little bit before your time, but I'm sure there's still bits from your childhood that you're able to put in it, right?
Well, I suppose it's a bit like foreshadowing what really happened. It was people are more familiar with the Troubles in Northern Ireland, and I was around then. I grew up there. But so this time before that, people might think, oh, it was all blissfully peaceful. And it wasn't. and there were flare-ups, and I guess this was set during one of those. And then there's an opportunity to kind of improve things that was squandered. So it, and when I was living there, I was involved in, the peace movement, and trying to bring communities together. And I guess every now and then something terrible happens, and then there's an opportunity to bring people together. And often that opportunity is squandered and people go back to their polarized positions. And I suppose that happened before the main violence of the more famous or notorious Northern Ireland Troubles broke out. And it's a little bit like an opportunity squandered. Of course, the people in the book don't know that then.
Yeah.
When things are resolved, they think, well, we're back to normal now. We don't need to worry about anything. Little knowing what the reader knows about what's coming later. But and you're right in that it's not a very well-known time, and the events are not well known. But there are people who do know about them. So I could probably write what I like if it was just for an English readership. But because there'll be people reading in Ireland as well, I was thinking I want it to be okay that I can go back there and I can talk about it there as well, and not. You want it to be accurate enough for them, but not sort of too pointlessly detailed, or rigidly hidebound by sticking to the historical reality for readers in other parts of the world. So I hope that I've got that balance right. Not, only you can decide.
You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. I'm here in conversation with local author Paul Waters, who's written a book called Black Watertown, amongst doing very various other crazy, fun things. That was an awful sentence. I shouldn't be saying that when I'm an author and Paul is an author and I'm coming out with very various. Anyway, as I say, you're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. This is Jessica Williamson with Turning Point. was Jessica Williamson with Turning Point. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and I'm here in conversation with novelist and crime writer Paul Waters.
Oh, well, and speaking of that, what have been some of the reactions to the book? What's the feedback you've received?
Well, it's been really good. I remember one reviewer, a blogger, Patterson Lorne, who's a respected blogger reviewer, and she said, "Oh yes, I'm glad to review this book because I can't remember now whether one of her relations was in the Orange Order back then, a kind of a loyal Protestant organization in Northern Ireland, or the police back then." And I was thinking, oh gosh, I hadn't realized that there are all these people you think are completely detached, but then they have their links, and so they are reviewing from a much more informed perspective than maybe I expected. But luckily, I passed muster with all of them, and so I had people on various different parts of the political and religious divide, or people who used to be in the services, and they might say, well, there's some quite heavy stuff there, but that all fits.
Yeah.
So luckily, it seems to have gone okay so far. Anyway,
I mean, I think as well, that's another thing where it's hard to get the balance of, you almost don't want to choose sides or say something was right or something was wrong. But I think at the heart of the story anyway, it's a very human driven story. So, and obviously we can all relate to that to a certain extent, whatever our, beliefs might be or whatever our allegiances might be as well.
Yeah, well, you don't want to kind of write a political diatribe or a lecture or anything like that. And it's hard to know. I mean, there are no right sides anyway. And it's just, I suppose, if you have any allegiance, you want it to be to the side of humanity or generosity of spirit or kindness. However, if you're writing a book, sometimes you have to put that to one side and inflict terrible things on people, and make things go wrong. And just when people are thinking, okay, the future is bright, then you have to take a sledgehammer and smash it.
Yeah.
Nasty.
So I was going to ask you as well about, because there's an audiobook of Blackwater Town available as well, right? How much involvement did you have in that process? Were you, did you get to choose the narrator and things like that?
I did not get to choose the narrator. I had some input into what sort of a person. So the paperback and the ebook are published by Unbound, but then the audiobook is published by a completely different publisher, W.F. Howe's, although this imprint is the Jammer audiobooks. And the person who narrates it is an Irish actor called Patrick Moy. And he's from Dublin, and but he obviously puts on different accents for different characters. And he's done Hilary Mantel's books. So what I thought, well, okay, if he's good enough for Hilary Mantel, I think I won't kick him. And he's a lovely guy as well, and very good, and he's very experienced at doing audiobooks. And I was very happy, and other people have liked it. One of the difficult things he was saying is that if you're doing a story in which you have characters from all over the world, that's fine. But if you have loads of them from the same place that's different from your place, like, I don't know, 10 characters from Liverpool, then you have to come up with 10 different Liverpool accents, which is difficult. One or two could be okay. So he's had to come up with various northern and southern accents as well, because the book is set on the border. So it's not so much like a Belfast accenty place, but it's more a rural, both sides of the Irish border, County Tyrone, County Armagh, County Monaghan sort of side, and with blow-ins as well. But everyone seems to have enjoyed it, and that's good. I'm happy.
Cool. Okay, and you mentioned Unbound as well. I mean, what was the process like working with Unbound? Because they're quite, I find them like really interesting, their model and their way of doing things. So it'd be cool to know more about that.
Well, they published various very high profile people. I think Terry Jones was, from Monty Python was maybe their first one, and they've had some bestsellers. The way it works is it kind of goes back and forth between being a completely traditional publisher and being a little bit different. So the first thing, you have to get your book taken on, whether you have an agent or not. I did have and do have, and they see whether they want to publish the book or not. So that's the main hurdle to get over. And then the next thing is getting advanced sales. I guess you have to prove there really is a market. They think, okay, it's good enough, but then is there a market for it? So you have to come up with enough advanced sales to justify the publication of it. So for me, that was persuading loads of people I don't know at all, I've never met before, that here's this idea for a book. I think you'd really like it. Do you want to order it in advance? And when sufficient people do that, it's then goes back to traditional model again. And they have, you've cover designers, you've structural editor, copy editor, proofreader, all that sort of thing. And, it's printed, it's distributed nationally and internationally, and, goes into shops, all that sort of thing. The thing that a lot of people might not realize about having a book published, you think, my book has been published, I finally made it, this is fantastic. I've had to go to all the trouble of writing it and going through the process, and now I can sit back and just watch it spread across the country and people buy it and read it. But unfortunately, you have to then do a lot of marketing to let people know that it exists and why they might like it, but also to bookshops, because they've got limited shelf space and they've got people like Richard Osman taking up whole tables and this sort of thing. Yeah. So a lot of publishers, maybe most publishers, won't have much effort put behind most of their writers, because either they're small publishers and they don't have the resources, or they're a big publisher, but most of the resources are going into really, really big names. So I contacted a lot of bookshops. So I love bookshops, and the idea of walking in and seeing your book on the shelf, or other people thinking, oh, what will I get, and choosing it, or being recommended by the staff. So I contacted bookshops across Scotland and England and Wales and Ireland, and it's in shops across the British Isles now, and in France and Spain. But I had to work hard to make that happen. And sometimes it would be like somebody who runs the shop listening to a program like this would think, oh, right, that sounds good, I'll order in some copies. So sometimes I just discovered them in shops, and it was a lovely surprise. But that takes a lot of effort, and not everyone has the stamina for that. Or the time. And also getting attention in the media, in the press, and that can be difficult. I was lucky in Ireland, I got a lot of coverage there. And then some of the local press here. But it's always a struggle to do that. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of work. But if you've written a story and you want people to read it, you have to let them know somehow.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. And just to end on, so well, first up, what's next for you? Are you working on another book?
I am. I'm working on a couple of things. So Blackwater Town is set in the 1950s on the Irish border, and I'm working on a sequel. And I don't want to say too much about it, because I don't want to give away too much about Blackwater Town. And I'm also working on some stuff set kind of in the present day, not too far from where we both are. So anytime I'm out and about, I think, that person looks like they'd be good to kill. How can I work that in?
Terrifying.
Yeah, I know. Radio presenters, they seem like a good target.
Well, it'd get the word out, wouldn't it? You could do it while they were on air.
Good day. Yeah, but on the other hand, I want to make sure this program goes out, so
Yeah.
maybe I'll wait until after the broadcast.
Cool. And just the final question is, where can people get hold of your books, and where can they follow you on social media?
Okay. Well, they can get Blackwater Town in Waterstone, in High Wycombe, or the little bookshop in Cookham, or bookshops in Beaconsfield, Chorleywood. It's also for sale in the deli in Chalfont St Giles, and
Nice.
the hardware shop, because at first when it came out, bookshops were closed. It's Untamed, anywhere, any bookshop, just go in, and if they don't have it in stock, you can order it. If you want to find out more about me, I have a website, which is www.paulwatersauthor.com, and that's Waters, Waters, paulwatersauthor.com, and I'm on Twitter, paulwaters99.
Thank you to Paul Waters for joining me. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wycombe Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and this is Jordana Blake, the show's very first guest, with U-Shaped Hole.
Take me walking through the park, through the brambles, through the dark, and I still have the sky and a home, you shaped So toss your ego in the sea. Don't want me, that's news to me. 'Cause I still live rent free in the me-shaped
I'm so over everything. Love songs dancing in the rain. I'm so over feeling tired. I've been running around chasing all your lies, blah, blah. And now I'm bored of hearing you talk, bored of hearing your thoughts, bored of hearing what's on your mind. So can you just shush? Bored time you move your lips, all I hear is la 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 la, blah blah blah, la 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 la, blah blah blah. Love promises, fake smile. I'm so over feeling tired. I've been running all night. And now I'm bored of hearing you talk, bored of hearing your thoughts, bored of hearing what's on your mind. So can you just shush? Bored of hearing you talk, bored of hearing your thoughts, because every time you move your lips, all I hear is la 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 la, blah blah blah, la 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 la, blah blah blah. Be quiet, sit down, stop running your mouth. Be quiet, sit down, because every time you move your lips, all I hear is blah la 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 la. Blah la 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 la, blah blah blah, la 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 la, blah blah blah, la 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 la, blah blah blah.
That was Blah by Lewis Branch, and before that we had U-Shaped Hole by Jordana Blake. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM at Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and it's time to head over to the Ilk Shed to catch up with Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review.
Nirvana, Nevermind. I had heard all about grunge and I'd seen Nirvana on TV, jumping about with their impractically low-slung bass and left-hand Telecaster. I had pictured the record company promotions department stroking their goatee beards, delighted to find a new mixture of genres, punks dressed as hippies. Once again I reminded myself of the glory days of 76 and 77 and took little further notice, having no interest in seeing another reworking of my past. But by the 2000s, Smells Like Teen Spirit had become a rock classic. It had joined the likes of Don't Fear the Reaper and Born to Be Wild as the song that represented a band's whole catalogue. It also stands out as being quite different from all the other rock classics. I found Nevermind in a library sale in the 2000s and I listened to it quite intently looking for another Teen Spirit, but failed. But there are other good tracks like Bloom and Lithium, and Come As You Are is very catchy and ingenious in the way it is led by the bass. I would say the things that made Nirvana stand out are Kurt Cobain's singing and his unique sense of melody and approach to chord changes. The other thing that is possibly overlooked is the role played by the bass and drum, which have to do so much more when there's only a trio. During lockdown, Dane got a Dave Grohl drum track for Teen Spirit and played and sung Kurt's parts to it. He asked me to do the best Chris Novoselic bass I could. I was not sure I had a strap long enough to do him justice, but even in my computer software, playing it in my cheap headphones, I could feel the power of the drums driving it along. The producer Butch Vig is able to make the distorted guitars sound exciting and powerful without being just noisy and overpowering, something he uses to good effect when playing with and producing the band Garbage. The bass has a twangy 60s quality, which makes it the lead instrument in the quieter passages before the distorted guitars and drums come thundering in. It is a very dynamic album, veering between a whisper and a roar, and from slowish acoustics to the frantic punk of a song which has a title that refers to the way a dog marks the boundaries of its property. Nevermind, Nirvana.
Big thank you to Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review. Thank you to Paul Waters for joining me. Thank you to everyone whose music I've shared. As always, if you'd like to have your music on the show, drop me an email, send me some MP3s to dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. I'm also always looking for potential guests, so do reach out and get in touch. You can also find us on Facebook if you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, and you can listen again on the Wickham Sound Listen Again. We're repeated Monday nights as well, and we're on Spotify, iTunes, all podcasty places. So, with all of that said, I'm going to leave you with one last tune, and this is the very talented Caitlin McAvoy, who did some work experience at Wickham Arts Centre, which I'm also on the team at. And weirdly, Caitlin and Jordana, who we played earlier, they're both currently at uni in Brighton, and they're both into live music and stuff, so I'm sure they're going to bump into each other as well. And actually, we chatted to Caitlin for the show, and she mentioned, because she'd been to the Wickham Arts Centre open mic, and she mentioned Jordana as being one of her favourite acts from the open mic. So hopefully they see each other, that'd be cool. Anyway, Caitlin McAvoy, 2 weeks. I will see you in 1 week.
Time passes slow through these 2 weeks. Oh, you left me alone. I fell to my knees. Oh, the loneliness built my walls again grew. Oh, a flower to wilt, but you never